Hey, rookie, try to beat me, Dot. If you really manage to defeat me, I'll kneel before you for 24 hours and obey your every command, Dot, whatever it is. Even if you tie me to a bed and play with me all day, I won't resist.
At Nellis Air Force Base, where a joint U.S.-Korea military exercise was underway, Major Ella Campbell, a decorated Delta Force officer, threw down impossible challenge to Ethan Miller, a newly arrived recruit. No one believed an inexperienced rookie could ever accept, much less survive, the overwhelming challenge of a battle-hardened veteran, Dot. But what unfolded between them next was something no one could have imagined. In the heart of the Nevada desert, Nellis Air Force Base buzzed with the intensity of joint Korean-American military exercises. The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete runways where advanced fighter jets stood in perfect formation, their metallic surfaces gleaming like mirrors under the relentless heat. Among the sea of uniformed personnel moving with practiced precision across the base, one moment stood out with particular tension. It was when Delta Force Major Ella Campbell approached the newest addition to their unit, a rookie named Ethan Miller, with a provocative challenge that would change everything. The training ground had been alive with the usual sounds of military preparation, when Major Campbell's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. "Beat me," she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat in combat scenarios. Her piercing blue eyes locked onto Ethan's with an intensity that made several nearby soldiers pause in their activities. "If you can actually manage to beat me, I'll follow your orders for an entire day. But when you lose, and trust me you will lose, you'll kneel before me and submit to my authority completely." The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down before medieval knights, and the surrounding soldiers exchanged glances that ranged from amazement to barely concealed amusement. Major Campbell stood there with her arms crossed, her muscular frame testament to years of rigorous training and real combat experience. Her short-cropped blonde hair caught the desert wind as she waited for the rookie's response. She had seen dozens of fresh recruits come through these gates, all thinking they had what it took to compete with seasoned veterans, only to be humbled by the harsh realities of elite military training. The afternoon heat shimmered off the tarmac in waves, creating an almost surreal backdrop for this unprecedented confrontation. Around them, the base continued its rhythmic operations with military precision, but the small group of soldiers who had witnessed Major Campbell's challenge began spreading the word through whispered conversations and subtle gestures. Ethan Miller felt the weight of every gaze upon him. At 22 years old, he was fresh out of basic training and advanced combat school, his uniform still carrying that crisp newness that marked him as inexperienced. His hands trembled slightly as he processed the major's challenge, knowing full well that accepting meant facing a decorated officer with years of combat experience in some of the world's most dangerous theaters of operation. The other soldiers began forming a loose circle around them, their conversations dropping to whispers as they sensed something significant was about to unfold. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nudged his companion and muttered under his breath, "This rookie's about to learn a hard lesson." Corporal Jackson shook his head with a mixture of sympathy and anticipation. "Campbell's going to destroy him. I've seen her take down guys twice his size." Private Martinez leaned closer to his squad mate. "Remember when she outperformed that Navy SEAL instructor last month? This kid doesn't stand a chance." The reputation of Major Campbell was well established throughout the base. She had earned her Delta Force designation through a combination of exceptional physical prowess, tactical intelligence, and an unwavering determination that had seen her through multiple deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Her service record included commendations for valor, expert marksmanship ratings, and leadership under extreme pressure that had saved countless lives in combat situations. But something in Ethan's eyes began to change as the initial shock wore off. The mocking stares, the smirks, the obvious assumption that he would back down or be easily defeated, sparked something deep within him. This wasn't just about a training exercise anymore. This was about proving his worth in a place where respect had to be earned through demonstration, not granted through rank or seniority. His mind flashed back to the grueling months of preparation that had brought him to this elite base. The countless hours of physical conditioning, weapons training, tactical studies, and psychological preparation had all led to this moment. Every blister on his feet from long marches, every muscle fiber torn and rebuilt through intensive training, every sleepless night spent memorizing combat protocols had prepared him for challenges exactly like this. "I accept your challenge, Major," Ethan said, his voice gaining strength with each word despite the nervous energy coursing through his veins. His response sent a ripple of surprise through the gathered soldiers, who had expected him to find some graceful way to decline or make excuses. Major Campbell's eyebrows raised slightly, a ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She hadn't expected such direct acceptance from someone so obviously outmatched, but she found herself respecting the courage it took to face such overwhelming odds. "All right then, rookie," she replied, her tone carrying both approval for his courage and certainty about the outcome. "Everything will be decided up there in the sky. Hope you're ready for what's coming." The training ground fell into an expectant silence as both fighters began their mental preparations for what would prove to be far more than anyone had anticipated. Word of the challenge spread quickly through the base communications network, and within minutes, soldiers from various units began making their way toward the designated training area where the confrontation would take place. The massive transport aircraft's cargo bay doors opened with a thunderous mechanical roar, and instantly the cabin was filled with howling winds that threatened to tear everything loose from its moorings. The aircraft had climbed to 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert, where the air was thin and unforgiving, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. Major Campbell and Ethan Miller stood side by side at the edge of the open bay, their parachute gear checked and double-checked by the jumpmaster who had overseen thousands of similar drops throughout his career. The desert floor stretched endlessly below them like a vast canvas of brown and gold, dotted occasionally by the geometric patterns of roads and the distant shimmer of Las Vegas on the horizon. At this altitude, the temperature had dropped significantly from the scorching heat they had experienced on the ground, and their breath formed small clouds of condensation in the thin air. Major Campbell adjusted her tactical goggles and turned to Ethan with the confidence of someone who had made countless jumps in far more dangerous conditions than this training exercise. "Last chance to back out, rookie," she called over the deafening wind noise, though her tone suggested she already knew what his answer would be. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could feel it through his tactical vest, but his resolve had only strengthened since accepting the challenge. "I'm ready, Major," he replied, his voice barely audible over the aircraft engines and rushing wind. The jumpmaster gave them the final countdown, and without hesitation, both soldiers launched themselves into the void. The initial sensation of free fall was overwhelming for Ethan, who had completed the required parachute training, but had never experienced anything quite like this high-altitude precision drop. The ground rushed toward them at terminal velocity, while powerful crosswinds buffeted their bodies like invisible hands, trying to push them off course. Major Campbell fell through the air with the grace and control of a seasoned professional, her body positioned perfectly to cut through the air resistance and maintain optimal trajectory toward the target zone. She had calculated her route with mathematical precision, accounting for wind speed, air density, and gravitational acceleration in a way that demonstrated years of experience in aerial operations. Ethan, meanwhile, struggled initially with the overwhelming sensory input of his first high-altitude combat jump. The thin air made it difficult to breathe, his vision blurred from the intense wind pressure, and the ground below seemed to shift and move in ways that disoriented his sense of direction. But then he remembered something his training instructor had told him during those grueling weeks of preparation. Don't fight the wind, feel it. Instead of panicking or trying to force his body into positions he thought were correct, Ethan began to relax and let his natural instincts take over. He started to sense the subtle changes in air pressure and wind direction that his body was naturally equipped to detect. The crosswinds that had initially seemed like chaotic forces became readable patterns that he could use to his advantage. He adjusted his body angle and began riding the air currents like a surfer riding waves, using the wind as a tool rather than fighting against it as an obstacle. Major Campbell, confident in her technical approach and years of experience, maintained her calculated descent path toward what she knew was the optimal landing zone. However, the desert wind patterns at 30,000 feet were more complex than even her extensive experience had prepared her for. Sudden thermal updrafts and unexpected wind shears began to throw off her carefully planned trajectory in ways that her instruments couldn't fully compensate for. As they approached the final phase of their descent, Ethan found himself in a zone of focused concentration he had never experienced before. The fear and nervousness had been replaced by an almost supernatural awareness of his environment and his position within it. He could sense exactly where the target landing zone was without even looking at his instruments, and his body seemed to move automatically to position him for a perfect landing. Major Campbell, meanwhile, encountered a sudden and powerful wind shear in the final seconds of her descent that pushed her several hundred yards off course from the target zone. Despite all her experience and technical skill, the unpredictable nature of high-altitude desert winds had worked against her at the crucial moment. Ethan touched down within the center circle of the target zone with a textbook-perfect landing, his parachute collapsing exactly as it should, while Major Campbell landed safely but noticeably outside the designated target area. The soldiers who had gathered to watch the competition stood in stunned silence as they processed what they had just witnessed. The rookie had not only survived his first high-altitude precision jump, but had actually outperformed one of the most experienced paratroopers on the base. The impossible had happened, and everyone present knew they had witnessed something truly extraordinary. The gathered crowd of soldiers stood in complete silence as the reality of what they had just witnessed began to sink in. Major Campbell approached Ethan with a mixture of surprise and grudging respect in her expression, though her military bearing remained perfectly intact. The other soldiers watched with anticipation, expecting the rookie to make some humiliating demand that would put the major in an embarrassing position. After all, the terms of their wager had been clear. The winner could command the loser for an entire day, and everyone assumed that a young soldier given such power over a superior officer would use it to extract some form of revenge or humiliation. But Ethan's next words surprised everyone present more than his victory in the jumping competition had. "Major Campbell," he said, his voice carrying a respect and sincerity that cut through the tension in the air, "I request that you teach me." The training ground fell silent, except for the distant sound of aircraft engines and the desert wind rustling through the nearby equipment. Major Campbell's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since the challenge had begun, she seemed genuinely taken aback by an unexpected turn of events. The surrounding soldiers exchanged glances of confusion and amazement, clearly not understanding why someone who had just won such a decisive victory would choose to request instruction rather than demand submission. "You want me to teach you?" Major Campbell asked, her voice betraying a hint of curiosity beneath her professional composure. "Yes, Major," Ethan replied without hesitation. "I may have gotten lucky today, but I know I have everything to learn from someone with your experience and expertise." This was not the response of someone drunk on victory or seeking to humiliate a defeated opponent. Instead, it was the request of someone who recognized that true strength came not from winning a single competition, but from the continuous pursuit of improvement and knowledge. Major Campbell studied Ethan's face for several long moments, searching for any sign of mockery or hidden agenda, but found only genuine earnestness and determination. Her initial bruised pride at being defeated by a rookie began to transform into something resembling respect for his mature handling of the situation. "Very well," she said finally, a slight smile beginning to form at the corners of her mouth. "If you're serious about learning, then we start tonight after regular training hours." That evening, as the desert air began to cool and the base settled into its nighttime routine, Major Campbell and Ethan met at a secluded corner of the training facility. The area was equipped with various physical conditioning apparatus and tactical training equipment that would become familiar sights over the following weeks. Under the stark illumination of overhead floodlights, Major Campbell began to share the wealth of knowledge and experience she had accumulated through years of combat and training. She taught him breathing techniques that would help him maintain calm and focus under extreme pressure, balance exercises that would improve his stability and control in various combat situations, and efficiency methods that would allow him to conserve energy while maximizing performance. Most importantly, she began to train his combat instincts, that indefinable sixth sense that separated truly elite soldiers from those who merely followed procedures and protocols. Ethan proved to be an exceptional student, displaying a natural aptitude for absorbing and implementing the lessons that Major Campbell shared with him. His progress was so rapid and impressive that it surprised even Campbell, who had trained numerous soldiers throughout her career. Night after night, they continued their private training sessions, with Ethan's skills and confidence growing exponentially under Campbell's expert guidance. What had begun as the fulfillment of a wager gradually evolved into something much deeper and more meaningful. The relationship between them shifted from that of superior and subordinate to teacher and student, and eventually began to approach something resembling a partnership between equals. Major Campbell found herself looking forward to their training sessions with an enthusiasm she hadn't felt in years, while Ethan discovered that he was capable of far more than he had ever imagined possible. Dawn became their sacred hour, when the training ground transformed into their private domain, long before the rest of the base began its daily activities. Major Campbell subjected Ethan to physically demanding training regimens that would have broken many seasoned soldiers, but he endured each challenge with quiet determination and unwavering focus. During rope climbing exercises, his palms would bleed from the friction and strain, but he would continue climbing until he achieved the required performance standards. When his shooting stance would collapse from exhaustion during extended marksmanship training, he would reset his position and continue firing until his accuracy improved. Rather than becoming discouraged by repeated failures, Ethan seemed to draw strength from each setback, using every mistake as a learning opportunity that would make him stronger and more capable. Major Campbell watched this transformation with growing admiration, recognizing in him the rare quality of perseverance that separated exceptional soldiers from ordinary ones. During night infiltration simulation exercises, their teamwork reached levels of precision and coordination that impressed even the most experienced observers on the base. They moved together through mock enemy territory with perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's actions and responding simultaneously to changing tactical situations. When faced with simulated enemy patrols, they would communicate through subtle hand signals and shared glances, creating an almost telepathic level of coordination that allowed them to navigate complex scenarios without ever compromising their position. Their success in penetrating and escaping from elaborate security perimeters became the subject of admiring conversation among other soldiers, who began to regard them not as a mismatched pair but as a formidable team. After one particularly successful night exercise, Major Campbell found herself viewing Ethan not as a rookie who had gotten lucky, but as a genuine partner whose capabilities complemented her own experience and expertise. On the evening before Ethan was scheduled to rotate to a different training assignment, rain began falling across the desert base, creating an unusual atmosphere of reflection and melancholy. The two soldiers found themselves standing together under the dark sky, watching the raindrops create small puddles on the concrete surfaces around them. The conversation that followed was unlike any they had shared during their weeks of intensive training together. "You've come further in these few weeks than most soldiers progress in years," Major Campbell said, her voice carrying a note of genuine pride in his achievements. "I couldn't have done any of it without your guidance," Ethan replied, his tone reflecting the deep respect and gratitude he felt toward his mentor. They exchanged symbolic items that evening, small tokens that would serve as reminders of the bond they had forged through shared challenges and mutual respect. Major Campbell gave him her grandfather's military compass, a family heirloom that had guided 3 generations of soldiers through dangerous missions around the world. Ethan offered her his rookie tags, representing not just his identity, but his commitment to the transformation she had helped him achieve. As they stood there in the rain, both of them recognized that something profound had developed between them that transcended the typical relationships found within military hierarchies. The connection they shared was built on mutual respect, shared challenges, and the deep satisfaction that comes from helping someone reach their full potential. Neither of them spoke about it directly, but both understood that their time together had changed them in fundamental ways that would influence the rest of their military careers. The emergency briefing came without warning, delivered by a stern-faced CIA operative who had arrived at the base in an unmarked government vehicle during the pre-dawn hours. The intelligence was both urgent and terrifying. An international terrorist organization known as Black Scorpion had acquired weapons-grade nuclear material and was actively preparing to deploy it in a major population center. The Joint Special Operations Command responded with immediate action, assembling a 12-person strike team from the most elite units available across all branches of the military. At the center of this carefully selected team were Major Campbell and Ethan, whose recent partnership and demonstrated capabilities made them natural choices for such a critical mission. This operation represented a fundamental shift from training exercises to real-world combat, where mistakes would result in casualties rather than poor performance evaluations. The mission parameters were devastatingly simple. Infiltrate the terrorist organization's heavily fortified compound, secure the nuclear materials before they could be weaponized, and prevent a catastrophic attack that could kill hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. During the tactical planning session, heated debates erupted among the team members regarding the optimal approach for penetrating the enemy stronghold. The traditional method favored by most of the team involved a high-altitude insertion followed by a coordinated assault on the compound's main defenses. However, Ethan surprised everyone by raising his hand and proposing an alternative approach that involved infiltrating through the underground sewer system that ran beneath the target facility. Many of the veteran operators initially dismissed his suggestion as the naive thinking of someone who lacked real combat experience. But as Ethan began to outline his reasoning, presenting detailed intelligence analysis and tactical considerations that demonstrated thorough preparation and strategic thinking, the room gradually grew quiet with attention. His proposal included specific countermeasures for the security systems they would likely encounter, alternative escape routes in case their primary extraction plan failed, and contingency procedures for various worst-case scenarios. The level of detail and sophistication in his planning impressed even the most skeptical team members, who began to realize that the rookie they had initially underestimated possessed genuine tactical intelligence. Major Campbell listened to his presentation with growing pride, recognizing the influence of her training in his strategic thinking, while also acknowledging the original insights that were uniquely his own. When the team leader called for a vote on which approach to adopt, Ethan's underground infiltration plan was approved by a significant majority. This decision marked a pivotal moment in his military career, representing his transition from a student following instructions to a strategic thinker whose ideas could influence life-and-death decisions. The approval of his plan also demonstrated that the other team members now regarded him as a legitimate contributor rather than dead weight who needed to be carried through the mission. As the briefing concluded and the team began their final preparations, the weight of responsibility settled on everyone involved, but particularly on Ethan, who knew that any flaws in his planning could result in mission failure and catastrophic consequences. The night of the operation arrived with perfect conditions for stealth: no moon, heavy cloud cover, and minimal wind that would help mask any sounds they might make during their approach. The team descended into the underground sewer system through a maintenance access point located 2 miles from their target, immediately encountering an environment that was both physically challenging and psychologically oppressive. The tunnels were filled with knee-deep water that carried an indescribable mixture of industrial waste and organic decomposition, creating an atmosphere that tested even the most hardened soldier's ability to maintain focus. More dangerous than the disgusting conditions were the numerous booby traps that had been strategically placed throughout the tunnel system by security-conscious terrorists who understood that underground approaches were possible. Motion sensors, pressure plates, and tripwire explosives had been carefully concealed in locations where infiltrators would be most likely to trigger them accidentally. The team moved with extraordinary caution, using specialized detection equipment to identify and bypass each trap they encountered along their route. When they reached a particularly complex obstacle consisting of multiple overlapping sensor fields that seemed impossible to circumvent without detection, Ethan implemented the innovative solution he had developed during his planning phase. Instead of attempting to destroy or disable the detection systems directly, which would likely trigger backup alarms, he proposed using the flowing water in the tunnels to create acoustic camouflage that would mask the sounds of their movement. By carefully timing their advancement with the natural water flow patterns and using specialized techniques to minimize their acoustic signatures, the team was able to move through the sensor field without triggering any alarms. The terrorists monitoring the security systems detected nothing unusual, allowing the strike team to maintain the element of surprise that was crucial to their mission's success. When they finally reached the target facility, the team split into 2 coordinated groups as planned, with Major Campbell leading Alpha Team to neutralize the central control room, while Ethan commanded Bravo Team in an assault on the power generation facility. Alpha Team's mission was to take control of the security systems and prevent the terrorists from activating any emergency protocols that might result in the nuclear materials being dispersed or destroyed before they could be secured. Bravo Team's responsibility was to eliminate the facility's backup power systems and prevent enemy reinforcements from being summoned to defend the compound. Both missions had to be executed simultaneously and successfully, as failure of either team would compromise the entire operation and potentially result in the nuclear materials being lost or deployed against civilian targets. Major Campbell's team moved with surgical precision through the facility's corridors, neutralizing guards silently and systematically until they reached the control room, where they could disable the alarm systems and lock down all communications. Meanwhile, Ethan led his team through a complex route that brought them to the power facility, where they planted charges that would eliminate electrical systems without causing explosions that might alert the defenders. The success of both simultaneous operations shifted the tactical advantage completely to the strike team, giving them control over the facility's security systems and isolating the terrorists from any outside support or reinforcement. Just as the strike team believed they had achieved complete control over the situation, the terrorist leader emerged from a hidden bunker carrying a metal briefcase that intelligence analysis confirmed contained the weapons-grade nuclear material. The man sprinted toward a helicopter landing pad on the facility's roof, where a waiting aircraft represented his final opportunity to escape with the deadly cargo and complete his organization's catastrophic plans. The team members who had secured the lower levels of the compound immediately began pursuing the fleeing terrorist through stairwells and corridors that led toward the rooftop. As they burst through the roof access door, they found themselves in the middle of a torrential rainstorm that reduced visibility to just a few yards and made every surface slippery and treacherous. The helicopter's rotors were already spinning up to takeoff speed, and the terrorist leader was just meters away from reaching the aircraft when the strike team opened fire. Multiple enemy snipers positioned on surrounding rooftops began laying down covering fire to protect their leader's escape, forcing the Americans to take cover behind various pieces of rooftop equipment. Major Campbell drew the attention of several enemy shooters by exposing herself to their fire, using her position to create opportunities for her teammates to advance toward better tactical positions. While she kept the snipers occupied with her aggressive maneuvering, Ethan sprinted across the rain-slicked rooftop toward the terrorist leader who had nearly reached the helicopter. The two men collided just as the terrorist was attempting to climb into the aircraft, and both of them tumbled off the helicopter's landing skid onto the concrete rooftop below. What followed was a brutal hand-to-hand combat sequence that was complicated by the pouring rain, which made every surface slippery and every grip uncertain. The terrorist leader was a skilled fighter who had survived numerous battles throughout his criminal career, but Ethan's recent intensive training with Major Campbell had prepared him for exactly this type of close-quarters combat. Fists, knees, and improvised weapons were employed by both combatants as they struggled for control of the briefcase containing the nuclear materials. The terrorist managed to land several solid blows that left Ethan dazed and bleeding, but he refused to release his grip on the case or abandon his mission. During the most intense moment of their struggle, both men lost their footing on the wet rooftop and tumbled toward the edge of the building. Ethan managed to secure his grip on the nuclear materials just as they both went over the side, falling toward the ground several stories below. The terrorist struck the pavement with fatal force, but Ethan's backup parachute deployed automatically when he fell past a predetermined altitude, saving his life but leaving him unconscious from the impact trauma. When the medical team reached him, they found the briefcase still clutched tightly in his arms, and the nuclear materials secure and undamaged. The mission had been completed successfully, but the cost had been higher than anyone had anticipated, with several team members injured and Ethan requiring immediate medical evacuation to the nearest military hospital. When Ethan regained consciousness in the sterile environment of the military hospital 3 days later, the first face he saw was that of Major Campbell, who had maintained a bedside vigil despite her own injuries sustained during the mission. The relief in her eyes was immediately apparent as she realized that he had survived the traumatic conclusion to their most dangerous assignment. The mission was a complete success, she informed him, her voice carrying a mixture of pride and exhaustion from the intense operations they had both endured. The nuclear materials have been secured and are being transported to a safe disposal facility where they can never again threaten innocent lives. As Ethan processed this information, Major Campbell reached over and gently grasped his hand, a gesture that conveyed far more than her words could express. "You are no longer a rookie, Ethan," she said with absolute conviction in her voice. "You have proven yourself to be a true warrior and a genuine partner in every sense of those words." The respect that had been absent from their first encounter at Nellis Air Force Base was now fully present in her tone and demeanor, representing a transformation that had been earned through shared dangers and mutual trust. Ethan removed his military dog tags and offered them to Major Campbell as a symbol of his commitment to their partnership and his respect for everything she had taught him. "These represent my identity and my honor as a soldier," he said, his voice still weak from his injuries but filled with sincerity. "I want you to have them as a promise that we will continue to serve together, no matter what assignments the future may bring." In response, Major Campbell removed her grandfather's military watch, a family heirloom that had accompanied 3 generations of soldiers through combat operations around the world. "This watch has seen more battles than either of us can imagine," she replied, placing it carefully on his wrist. "It belongs with someone who understands what true service and sacrifice mean." The months that followed their successful mission brought new challenges and opportunities for both soldiers, as their reputations for effectiveness and reliability spread throughout the special operations community. Ethan continued to develop his tactical skills and leadership capabilities under Major Campbell's ongoing mentorship, while she found her own perspectives and approaches enhanced by his fresh insights and innovative thinking. Their partnership evolved beyond the traditional boundaries of military hierarchy, becoming a collaboration between equals who complemented each other's strengths and compensated for each other's weaknesses. Together, they accepted increasingly challenging assignments that took them to dangerous locations around the world, where their combined expertise and unshakable mutual trust made them one of the most effective teams in the special operations community. The final scene found them standing side by side on another military base, preparing for another mission, no longer as a veteran officer and an untested recruit, but as equal partners whose bond had been forged through shared challenges and proven in the crucible of real combat. The message was clear and powerful. True strength comes not from rank or experience alone, but from the respect and trust that develops between individuals who are willing to risk everything for each other and for the principles they serve. Their story had become an inspiration to other soldiers who witnessed the transformation that was possible when pride and prejudice were replaced by mutual respect and shared dedication to excellence.